about this love. About this love.
How you guys doing today? You are tuned into About This Love podcast with myself, Delsk, and my beautiful wife, Sherelle. Say what's up to the peoples.
Hey, hey.
Hope you guys had a good week, a good weekend. We know we've been kind of doing shows here and there. I've also released the Fatherhood podcast. Definitely check that out whenever you're free. We also plan on releasing a Fatherhood and About This Love crossover talking about fatherhood. But until then, for today, we just wanted to have a conversation just about, do people kind of regret their spouse? And I'll ask my wife, I'll start off with you. Do you feel like people regret marrying their spouse? And also I want to ask you, just to make it personal, do you regret marrying me, or do you think I regret marrying you?
Okay, so you asked two questions, and then one was a two-part question. So your first question was, do I think that people regret marrying their spouse?
Yes.
Yeah, actually, I do. And I think we all know that because people get a divorce, right? People get divorced. And so I just think that, people do regret, like, a few years in or a couple months in, it's not all that it's cracked up to be. A couple months ago, we had a podcast episode about, the title is slipping my mind right now, but we were talking about how the honeymoon phase or the infatuation phase gets you to marriage. And then the commitment phase is like the last phase, like in your marriage.
I think it was like dating after 50 or was it, or dating in the 1950s?
No, it wasn't the dating in the 1950s one. It was actually the, I don't even remember the name of it, but I know we were talking about, I think it was about commitment. And I was thinking about, like, when does commitment in marriage happen? And so we were having that conversation a few episodes back. I'll definitely link it, in the description if you're listening to this on YouTube or any of the platforms. But, I'll definitely let you guys know what episode that is when I go back and look at it. But, I was just thinking about how the love part, I was just telling a friend of ours that, like, when you're married, this is the fight. And I'm starting to realize that this is the fight. And like we were saying in a previous episode, was just how you have to fall in love with the mundane. But I just think that people do regret it. Like, when you're going up to marriage, you're just in the height of everything and emotions are going, and you're like, oh man, this is so great. I love this person. I could see myself with them forever. And then, like, a fight happened. You know what I'm saying? Like, y'all have an argument. There's disagreements, and it just seems like it's every day. And then you're like, nah, this wasn't the person for me. So,
As if disagreements wouldn't happen if it was somebody else.
I mean, you start to, like, honestly, you do start to believe that, like, that disagreements do happen. I mean, wouldn't happen as much if it's someone else. And then thinking, like, even if it's somebody else, you divorce that person and go with someone else, I believe that you still have issues with them. And then you start to feel like it's you. But it could be you. Well, I'll say this. It is you because it's your mindset. It's you and the other person, because I don't think there's, like, a perfect spouse. You know what I'm saying? Now, to answer your second question, I will be honest. I think there was a time where I thought that, I made a mistake, that I wasn't following the Lord, and that I didn't think that this marriage was going to work out. And you know that because I've shared that with you.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you've had those thoughts as well. And you know why? It's because of, what I said just a few moments ago was just like, we were arguing, things didn't seem like they were adding up. And then it's just kind of like, well, I don't know. Like, I don't know about this. And, I'd rather just be by myself. Like, that's the easy thing to do, is like, well, I'd rather just take care of me and mine. And, I bought the couch, you bought the TV, we could just split it or leave it or whatever and just kind of just go. Like, your mind starts going there. And so I think, that's why it's important who you have around you when you're going through those times, because they could either help push you more out there into the way that you're thinking, or they can reel you back in and be like, no, like you were saying, like, everyone has a hard time. This is not, this is normal. This is what couples go through. And you're like, nah, but like, this is worse. This tops it, What about you?
I was gonna say, just add like a little soberness to it and give context. I think really what it is, over this past week, I've watched a lot of relationship podcasts on YouTube, and a lot of what I was watching and listening to in the podcast, I like some of the content, but I also feel like some of the content was just a little bit like too worldly and ungodly. But in anything, you can always hear the heart of people. And I was telling my wife, as it relates to marriage and relationships, there's a new gospel, or not a quote unquote from God, but it's a worldly gospel where it's like women in today's society or today's world, they want a man to make a lot of money. They want him to be a monster in the bed. They want him to be a perfect gentleman. They want him to be a hopeless romantic. They want him to be everything. And it's like, really, what that is just, it's a fantasized reality. It's not real. And I think that oftentimes that's what women look for when they enter into marriage. And men to an extent, but I think that more so for women, they look for the great provider, him to be a hopeless romantic. And from the man's perspective, he's just looking for do him like what he sees on porn movies. So you begin.
I think it's more than that though for men.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is that like the basis of why people enter into relationships or why they enter into them initially is just a kind of like a false reality of fantasy of a fantasy. Like today when I was coming home, I was behind a guy at a stop sign. He had a sticker on his truck, and the sticker said "Work, kids, take kids to sports," and repeat it the next day. And I was like, wow, how mundane. And I was like, yeah, because I said it all the time. Like, when you begin to have children and just work different lives, different schedules, it becomes very mundane. Like you just day by day. As it comes to like people regretting marrying the spouse, I always think about things like, well, why do people have conflict? Or just last month, I saw these two on vacation, or just last year, I saw these two, in Hawaii or in the Bahamas or in Alaska, on a safari or on an adventure. It's like, well, when do you actually regret marrying your spouse? It's when times are bad. So it's like, well, if the only time you actually regret marrying your spouse is when times are bad, it's like, well, then like, isn't there something wrong with that picture? And don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that everybody who regrets marrying their spouse only does it during bad times. I know there's plenty of situations. I know people personally who may have married somebody because they were pregnant, or married somebody because they really don't want to be with the person, they really don't want to marry, but they've been with them for so long, and he or she may have gave them an ultimatum, so they just married them because they were familiar, and and some women have married men because they just felt like, well, I never be able to find nobody else, so I'm just go ahead and marry that person, and then when as life goes on and marriage goes on and life becomes mundane, they begin to have regrets. So I understand from that perspective why people could have regrets.
I don't think it's only because life becomes mundane. It could
no, what I'm saying.
I get what
I'm
you're
just saying.
saying.
Just from that perspective, it's like, because just from that perspective, but I think that especially for the believer, like, it's human nature to want to escape suffering, but the Bible tells you that one of the ways you mature is through suffering. Even when you begin to read the scriptures, was it Joseph who was in prison for 17 years? Moses, who was raised under Egyptians leadership and rule, he went to be in the wilderness for 40 years, which was his level of suffering for a season. It was like, believers, we don't want to suffer, and anytime we're suffering, it's human nature to want to escape that. And for that, part of this conversation is marriage. Anytime I'm having a bad time in my marriage with my wife or my husband, I just want to roll out or look for the easy way out, which is to cheat or just do me, or whatever that may look like. So I think that a lot of regretting marrying your spouse is oftentimes, it's just really just it's just emotions, and really not putting things into proper perspective.
I definitely agree with you. I see what you're saying, but I was just going to say, like, what I was starting to say earlier was, I do not think that it's just the mundane or just the bad times. I think also like what you were saying earlier was our expectations of a person. Like, I think we have unrealistic expectations of a person. We think that people are superhuman, and we kind of have like carved out this like cutout of like our spouse and what they should be. And so we're walking into marriage with that. Like, I mean, even if you're marrying somebody from your past, and it's kind of like, well, I know them, they know me, we've been friends for a long time, so we might as well get married because, we're in the space where we want to be together. I mean, like, basically, we should be together.
Yeah.
And so I think once the person gets with them, it's almost like, I mean, anyone who they desire to be with to the point of wanting to be married and, think that they want to commit to them, it's like, well, dang, I thought he was a good cook. He was cooking all the time when we were dating. He ain't cooked not once since we've been married. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
It's almost like, like I said, that infatuation phase have like worn off. And then, this is the commitment part. You have to actually fall in love with your spouse and not just have that infatuation with them. So someone on Facebook in one of the groups that I'm in, this young lady was saying how she did not want to, like, when she gets married, she did not want to live with her spouse. And so she asked, like, is that weird? Has anybody else had those feelings or emotions? And I kind of laughed to myself because, Dale, like, I definitely had those feelings or emotions before meeting you. And I shared that with you. I said, I was telling people in the salon, like, hey, if I get married, I don't think that I would want to live with my spouse, the first couple years until I get to know them and trust them. And so someone asked me, like, why would you marry someone and you don't trust them? And I was like, well, because you just don't trust them. I think I was coming from a place where, like a lot of people come from when they want to be married. It's just that they hadn't seen successful examples of marriage in their own lives, like in their personal lives. And actually what just came to mind was just how, like I was kind of saying earlier about expectations. And I was just thinking about like what we use to build our idea of marriage. And so we set that sometimes unrealistic expectation, especially when we don't have anyone that we've seen walk in that, in that
reality.
That reality, and have success in their own life, so we don't know what that's supposed to look like. And I definitely empathize with the girl. And, I've seen other comments after my comment saying like, oh, well, that's silliness, or, I've never heard of that. That's weird. And I'm just thinking, like, I think it's a real fear. And what I ultimately told the girl was that, like, it's definitely fear. The thing about marriage is just that, once you see the ugly side of your spouse and they see the ugly side of you, how are you guys going to respond to one another and still love each other through that? And that's where you begin to actually like grow and love on one another. It's just, how are we responding? Just think about our marriage and how the whole interaction between you and I have been, you do something, I respond, I do something, you respond. And it's like, how are we responding to one another? And people don't ever stop to think about that. It's just how we're choosing to respond. But then also our responses are based on not seeing successful examples, outside influence telling you, well, that's not going to work, or marriage not for you, or, that's for somebody else, or just, whatever we see on social media. Like, what are your thoughts?
No, it just goes back to what I said before, about just having a fantasized perspective on marriage. And it can be that, and it usually is that in the beginning. But again, once life begins to happen and, children come in the picture or not, or you guys may just work two different jobs, and, on two different times. But I think that it's just logical to feel that way. It really is, to feel that you regret marrying your spouse when you guys are in hard times. But like I said before, if you're not having that thought when times are going good, then you really have to question even the thought in your mind, like why do I even believe I married the wrong spouse? And when is it that I believe that? Because it's like, if I can have a good time with a person, but I'm not willing to have a bad time with them, then it's not really like that I married the wrong person. It could just be that we don't know how to handle conflict, or we don't handle certain situations too well. And I think that that's more of the question, of questions that I would ask my spouse if I did feel that way. Now, I know sometimes when I've spoken to people in the past, they've been very specific. Like I was speaking to a young lady, and one of the things that came up was that just the spouse wasn't really helping with the children, and they both work. They both work, and so I think that could be another instance where somebody may regret marrying somebody. And on the flip side, I've also heard people say, well, multiple individuals that I was speaking to, well, my wife doesn't really give me sex too often, or I have to beg for it. I should have married somebody that was a little bit more sexually, had a higher sex drive. And again, I just go back to what is not being said, or what conversations are we not having with our spouses. And even if things don't change, I feel like it's just the mentality of humans. It's the human nature that if something gets tough, if I don't get what I want, I'm just going to be out. And really, it's childish. It's actually a childish mentality to have, and everything that I'm saying, I'm just, as I say certain things, I'm actually thinking about scriptures. And I think about how, what is it, James, it says, he who endures will get a crown of life, to paraphrase. And I think that all throughout scripture, there's scriptures that say, hey, endure. You're like, well, why does the Lord keep telling me to endure? The Lord tells me to endure 50 million times because it is human nature that when things go wrong, when I start suffering, when things just don't go the way that I want them to, I want to run. That's the nature of the human soul. And it's like, I went to Job Corps when I was like in my teens, and I used to go to a faith-based, a Christian-based program, and the woman there would teach Bible studies every Wednesday. And one of the things that she would always say to us when I was a young believer is that we need to know and understand the schemes of the enemy. And thinking back now, as a mature believer, like I realized, like, wow, that's true. Because like when you don't understand the schemes of the enemy, or when you go throughout your marriage and you realize that certain things keep happening, it's a cycle. It's like, what aren't you not recognizing? And sometimes it takes the Lord to reveal that to you. Like, hey, every time, your husband, you come home with the kids and your husband don't want to help, you get upset and y'all, not talking to each other, for 3-4 weeks. I'm just giving an example. I don't know. I'm just throwing something out there, but it's like coming to a point where we can really sit down and have a conversation. And I feel like one of the problems that I found recently in marriages, I'm talking to a few different married people, and when you actually talk to married people, one of the things that even in my own marriage, I'll say even in my own marriage, when you begin to talk to people, what you really realize is that people are not actually conveying their needs. They're not conveying what they need.
Yeah.
And here's the kicker. Then when they do convey what they need, the other spouse, whether it's the husband or wife, it may seem as if they're very non-responsive to that need. And I feel like that's really when people begin to feel like, well, I married the wrong person. And I'm like, no, because that could be anybody, you know what I'm saying? And again, it really just goes back to having the conversations over and over and over and over and over. You get the point. Having the conversations until things begin to stick, instead of having the mentality, I'm just going to give up. I'm done. That's not the mentality as believers that we are to have. We are to have the mentality that I'm actually willing to endure and suffer. Like me and my wife was reading scripture last night on Paul, and I was saying to my wife, like Paul was talking about believers wronging each other, and Paul was like, you go to the courts with ungodly people, and he was like, the very fact that you've gone to courts and judges is already proof that you're already defeated. He said, why not rather you just be wronged or cheated? And I was like, wow. And that's what my wife just kind of tying it into marriage. Is like, even when you get to a point in your marriage where you feel like, well, your spouse is letting you down, or they're not understanding you, or they're not hearing you, until your spouse comes to a place where the Lord begins to speak to their heart and really kind of highlights things to them so they can want to change, why not you rather just be cheated or be wronged? And by cheated, I'm not saying like with any outside parties, or I'm just saying, like, in general,
like not cheated on.
Why not you just rather be wronged for a season? And I think but that's just the mentality that people don't have. So I think that when it comes to marriage and did I marry the wrong person, what I would say to anybody is, first of all, dismiss that mentality. Like that mentality should never even pop up in your head. Will it? Yes, it will. But even when it does, don't act on it. You know what I'm saying? So I think that's really what I would say, because I know from experience and even watching shows with my wife where people just have arranged marriages, or people just meet for the first time and end up being married. And then me, I'm the kind of person, I'm a skeptic. So I go back and look 5 years later, are they still married? It's like, wow, they actually are still married. So it's like, that actually tells me that two people can actually meet up, form a bond or a chemical, I'm sorry, I'm about to say chemical connection.
What is a chemical connection?
I don't know. I'm talking about chemistry, but form a bond based off some form of likeness that they have with each other, and they can find common grounds and begin to build a friendship and build love and be married together for a long time. So it's like, if you two people that know each other, y'all wasn't arranged, y'all wasn't like in a blind date or one of the TV shows where y'all just got married on the first day, it's like, you definitely can do it. If two strangers can do it, then two people who are not strangers can definitely do it. So that's why when it comes to do people regret marrying their spouse, I kind of dismiss that whole notion, because it's ultimately it's foolishness. It's rubbish. It really is.
Yeah, I understand that you're saying it's foolishness, but here's what, I was just sharing with a friend the other day. I said, and this was just really heavy on my heart. I said, do not give up. Like, don't grow weary in well doing. I was telling this friend, I said, there would be no me sitting here with you talking about your marriage if I did not endure in my marriage. And same with the people who sat and gave us advice and, walked us through. And I said, it's really important to start talking to people who support and love you, support your marriage and love you. You know what I'm saying? And that, I think that takes a level of transparency.
And humility too.
Well, yeah, that, and I said that as well, but I think that's a level of transparency on both parties. You don't have to tell every single thing that happened between you and your spouse or uncover your spouse, but really, really find people who are married and who are happily married, and they are happy to see you grow and thrive, and they want to be there for the bad times as well as the good times. And I think that's something that we should start praying for, because we just we go to the coworkers, we go to the friends, we go to the familiar, in our family, but it's like they'll say anything out their mouths to you,
and they don't have your best intentions either.
Well, exactly. And don't get me wrong. They could even be believers. They could also be believers. And that's, that's real taboo to say, that they could be believers, because it's like, well, I believe in God. They believe in God. And so, why can't I go to them? And it's like, well, let's look at their maturity level. Because something you said about maturity, and I'm just in there thinking, you have to weigh it out. You really have to discern, is this person really mature enough to handle what I have to tell them, and won't look at me or my spouse differently, or won't think, they in some mess, because we're also human. Believers are human. And so, in case y'all ain't know, and I think that we get this false perception of I can just, go to my other Christian friends and talk with them. And it's like, can you really talk with them about this or talk with them about that? I remember when you and I first met, and I was being surrounded by more believers, and I thought that everyone was on the same level. You know what I'm saying? Of belief. And I don't as a young believer, I just thought that was such an amazing thing. And I just needed to grow up. But then I realized that, man, these people over there got they stuff, and those people over there got their stuff, and those people over there, they showing up, to the Bible studies, or they showing up to the events, but they really in some crap behind the scenes. And so then it's just kind of like, not that you're cutting them off or not that you're judging them, but you're like, okay, if I know that they are dealing with issues in their marriage, I'm probably not going to go to them. Like, as far as like, the wife is about to leave the husband, and I know that, or I see the, the chaos going on, and it's like, well, they're believers, so I'm just gonna go to them. And it's like, you probably, like, they already have a lot going on. You cannot put any weight on those type of relationships, not in this season, maybe in another season, but not in that season. Or, oh yeah, now my best friend is married and she's been married for 2 months. So now I can talk to her about all my marriage stuff. And it's like, no, you still cannot, because, you have to weigh out, like, she's new in marriage, and what you may say may harm or change or shape, how that person views their own marriage. It may, like, bring up some fears. I mean, I had a friend who, I'm thankful that she had been married a little bit longer than we were. And I was just so thankful that she really kind of guarded, what she said to me about marriage before I got married and after, you and I got married, because I could have been walking around thinking, well, her husband did this and that, and how do I know that my husband not going to do this and that? I mean, aside from the fact that, like, you're not him, but you know what I'm saying?
I understand.
But it's easy to kind of do that comparison, especially when those are only like real life examples, and that's where we have to pull from. So, I mean, I think that's just another thought. I was going to say something just along the lines of how we regret things. I'm just kind of like, not put up with anything, but it's like you said, it's the growing pains. I believe that it's the challenges, that gets us to the next thing. But something that I was saying to you before on a previous podcast was about having those moments where you and your spouse reconnect, because when there's bad times, and this was told to us during our marriage counseling before, you and I got married, what was said to us was like, have those good times, definitely go out, like, date one another, talk, do this and that. And then when the hard times come, you're able to pull from that as a reminder of, like, man, we really had a good time. And maybe I was just being a butt, or maybe, he's just having a tough time on the job and just taking it out on me. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that doesn't excuse the behavior or the response to the behavior, but it's also a reminder that I really do love this person. I really do want to build with this person, and I want to grow and love with this person.
Yeah.
You had something to say?
Yes, I was just going to say that when it comes to marriage, try not to allow yourself to have the thoughts of regret. Because first thing I want to say is just knowing and understanding the schemes of the enemy is that, one, that's not the Lord. That's not the Lord. One of the other night I was reading Revelations and I was praying, and one of the words that they call Satan in the Revelations is the accuser of the brethren. And I was thinking just how that's not really the heart of the Father. One is to keep keep record of a person's wrongdoing. Am I gonna mess up? Have I messed up in my marriage and done things my wife probably didn't like that made her feel betrayed? Of course. Has she done things in our marriage that I didn't like, that probably made me feel betrayed or made me angry? Of course. Am I probably going to do some more in the future? Of course. Is she? Of course. Because we're human. But one of the things that I keep stressing to people who are married is, you have to have conversations with your spouse. You have to continue to stress what you need and what you want. And understand that a want is not a priority, but what I need is. And your husband, comes home from work, and you both come home from work, and you're always dealing with the kids, getting them ready for bed, getting them ready, giving them baths, feeding them. Express, I need help. I know I want help. I need help. I need help. And express that this is unacceptable. I need help. Vice versa. If you're a man that says with your wife, I need help. I need help. But always have the conversations and express that I need help, and make sure it's understood. This need that I have is not a want, it's a need. I'm exhausted. I need help. I'm exhausted. But again, I can't say it 1 or 2 times and let 5 months go by and not say anything and then no, continue saying it. If you guys say it 3 times, 4 times a week, say it. If you guys say it 5 times a day, say it. But eventually they'll get the point. Or even if, because I know sometimes with men, we'll do things just because we don't want our wives to nag us. And in doing so, it actually becomes a habit. So sometimes women don't realize, well, I don't want to nag him. No, sometimes you may have to nag him, and you nagging him, he may do it out of instinct because he doesn't want you nagging. And so out of that instinct becomes habit. So naturally he just begins to do it anyways, you know? So it may start off as bad and conflict and drama in the beginning, but in the end, it may result in peace because at least your need is being articulated and being received, even if it is being received or done in a malicious way on the other person's part. At least they're doing it. It's a start.
No, Dale, I'm gonna disagree with you. Like, yeah, keep talking about it, but that's the works part. And I want to stress that it's faith and works. So prayer along with that. And,
I mean, of course.
and I mean, yeah, no, you're saying of course, but I'm also saying it. I want to say it because, you know, I think that we belittle prayer so much. And when we don't have nothing left to, you know, to give or to stand on, we still stand. But it's like, what are we standing on? We're standing on our faith. Our
relationship with God.
Our relationship with God, you know, and we forget that. And I feel like lately I have been struggling, and the prayer had been either my tears or it's been, Lord, help me. Lord, help me. And really, I think the Lord is starting to show me that even in the heart and even in the way that I'm doing things, like my heart is not in it, you know, meaning like kind of like what you were saying, like, oh, well, I'm gonna just do this, you know, so my spouse won't nag in his habit. But then it's just kind of like there's no blessing in that because you are still thinking like I'm gonna just do the bare minimum so they don't say nothing to me. But the heart behind it, I believe that the Lord is trying to get to your heart behind it through your spouse. And it's just kind of like, well, Lord, as much as we want to be like, you know, Lord, help my spouse to see this and that. It's like, Lord, help me. I am men. I am the one that needs to be like delivered from just the way that I'm thinking, the way that I'm like doing life. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I believe that the heart behind it needs to change. Like, if we're honest, it's like, yeah, I'm just going to do this because it sounds good, or I'm going to say that or whatever because it looks good or whatever because that's what they want. And yes, I do agree with you. It does become habit when you do it over and over again. But I think that the next part needs to be that we pray.
Needs to be a heart change.
Yeah, there needs to be a heart change because it's like you're going to start regretting even more. Like, oh, well, I'm going to just do this so they don't say nothing. I'm going to just do that so they don't say nothing. And then you look at your plate and your plate is tipped over and on the ground because it's like it was too much to take on anyways. Instead of like, you know, my heart really is to serve you. So let me serve you. And I want to do it in love. You ever heard people say like, oh, don't eat so-and-so's cooking because they don't cook with love? You've heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, but I think there's something to that. Like, I know that that's like a worldly way of like saying things.
Food tastes bad or they can't cook. Yeah.
Exactly. But I was just sitting there thinking like, you know, I mean, I get it. Like when you do something like in love, I feel like that radiates through whatever you offer to your spouse. I mean, I think that goes on in relationships as well. Like friendships, family, like whether or not they recognize it, I think that they feel the difference. Like you could just feel the difference. I mean, everybody on this energy kick and it's just like, oh, well, you know, they got bad energy. They got this and that. And I'm just kind of like, I mean, listen, like you ain't do that in love. Like we have a joke around here where, you know, whenever my daughter's kind of fussing or, you know, the baby's fussing, it's just kind of like, you're not loving them the way that they want to be loved. And I mean, sometimes it's the unseen. Well, not sometimes. Like if we hadn't learned anything from our relationship with God is that it's the unseen a lot of times. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's the part. You don't necessarily always see the love, but you can feel it. And when it's not there, when your heart isn't in it, you feel that. And you can't necessarily articulate that, but you know that's what it is, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
But, sit down and think about, like, sit down and actually write it down and ask the Lord, like, what in my heart are you trying to bring out? Like, where do you want me to go? Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, where do you want this to go? What do you want me to do? And I think that, you'll see a definite change in your marriage. You know what I'm saying? And the way that you respond to your spouse, it won't be as snippy, or when they do get snippy, it's like you can start to have compassion for them because you're seeing they're probably just tired, or frustrated. And I mean, you're not my enemy. Like, you're not my enemy. I love you. You love me. And we need to overcome this together,
Yeah. I just think in all things, there's a scripture. I don't know the address, but it said, whatsoever is holy, whatsoever is pure, think on these things. And I, even in my marriage, like whatsoever is holy, because, my marriage before God is holy. My marriage bed before God is holy. The relationship and the way I treat my wife, my spouse, me, my wife treat me is holy. And whatever good things that we have had and want to have, I should be thinking on those things, even in the midst of our conflict. I should be thinking on those things, and I just think that one of the things that me and my wife, our goal is, when we first got the podcast, is to really bring the culture of heaven and our marriage and our family through a podcast and through audio, because we both have been brought up in homes where we've seen how destructive certain behaviors are and can be. But we've also been blessed to be around individuals who are what I would say God sent, God given, who know how to treat their wives. Wives know how to treat their husbands. The husbands lay down their lives for their wife and children, work multiple jobs, take the kids to, out to the park, and just really sacrifice themselves and empty themselves out for their wives and children, and vice versa. The wives empty themselves out for their husband. So it's like, I've been around both cultures, and what I've seen in all of that is sometimes what God wants to show us is that the scriptures can actually become life.
Yeah.
And in our podcast, what we intend to do is what we have done is brought life. This stuff can be done. Like, we ain't over here doing a podcast. We faking most of the time. When we have gone through problems in our marriage, we actually haven't done a podcast.
Yeah.
Because we don't want to be recording or talking about, marriage and healthy relationships. And we in the house ain't spoke in weeks. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, we just don't record. And sometimes, life happens, having kids, and as I said, the basement flooded, so we're not able to get in our studio and record. But in anything, what we intend to give you is truth, authenticity, and the culture of marriage as God intended for it to be. With that, I'm done for today. I mean, did you have any closing remarks that you would like to say?
Yes, no one wins. Whenever you play that game, that tit for tat, you don't forgive your spouse, you are not winning. I do want to say that. You feel like, oh, they're not going to get over on me. You both lose at the end. Like, you guys both lose if you continue on in that vein. And so I just wanted to say that, like, humility really is a big thing, and forgiveness. I think that's like the two most important things, like, in a marriage, because y'all not going to win. Your children lose out, your friends lose out, your family lose out, you guys lose out. There are more people than you realize, people you haven't even met yet, than you realize, that are depending on you to be successful in your marriage.
Yeah.
And I mean, I want y'all to think on those things, that, you guys aren't going to win in the end if you keep on in that vein.
Well, thank you guys for joining us today. We hope you benefit from this conversation that we had. We hope you also check out our fatherhood podcast as well, or should I say mine's, but my wife helps me with it. I just talk about, just fatherhood and being a father and different things as it relates to that. I will say, if you're listening to this on YouTube, please give us a like. Oftentimes people don't realize that, while we do this for free, obviously it's a podcast, you listen to it for free. If you want to support us, you definitely can. Our PayPal and Cash App things are definitely in the link. But one of the biggest ways you can support us as relates to YouTube is just liking the video. If you listen to the video, like the video, because it helps our video stay in the YouTube algorithm. By you listening to our videos and not liking them, you're doing us a disservice because, our videos don't get shared to a broader audience, so just, if you can, like the video, share it. Thank you for tuning in with us today. And until next time, peace.
Peace.
Thank you for tuning into today's podcast episode. Be sure to follow and share your thoughts as we continue the conversation on About This Love's Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube channel. Join the About This Love community on Discord. The ATL podcast episodes can be found on all podcast streaming platforms. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, please consider submitting a donation via PayPal or Cash App to keep our podcast going. Click on the link below to find our podcast and social media platforms. Thank you. Until next time, peace.